Hey everyone, this is Christian from Beyond Consulting. Great to see you here. Before we start the show, I just want to give you a brief about what's going to come up because I will be speaking with Lisa Sherwell. She's Chief People Officer at SUSE. And if you don't know, SUSE is a company that helps more than 60% of the Fortune 500 companies with mission critical workloads. They are an open source company. So we're going to explore a bit how can you give customers choice and interoperability, and how do you create an environment also where that can happen, what it means for the people strategy, and also how can you actually recreate overall a company mission and vision, including the use of AI. So stay tuned. Yeah. Also, Lisa is going to share a radically different view on specialists versus generalists. Enjoy the podcast. Here we go. Lisa, welcome to the Beyond Consulting podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. As usual, in Beyond Consulting, we explore with the border between consulting topics, industry topics, and talking to transformation leaders. And today, it's really my pleasure to have you here because there is maybe a bit of a connect with the open source and the open talent and all these open things with SUSE, which is the company that you're working for. Where you are the CPO, and as a lot of our audience would now think CPO is a Chief Procurement Officer. It's actually at SUSE the Chief People Officer, and you've been in business as an executive for more than 25 years in B2B, B2C in the technology world. So really great to have you here today.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm always interested to talk about what's going on in the world. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, and it's my pleasure. And maybe before we get into all the the deep content, can you tell us a bit about yourself, how you got to SUSE, and how you got into the transformation work that you're doing?
Sure, absolutely. I've spent my career working in a lot of very different roles, and I think my career has been marked by lots of very strange pivots. So I spent a fair amount of time in sales, leading sales teams and working as a salesperson myself. I spent 10 years of my life working as an IT manager. I spent a fair chunk of time as a general manager leading large scale outsource operations and business process outsourcing. And then just before I came to SUSE, I went to SAP to really run one of their biggest customers accounts at the time. And as much as I really loved my time at SAP, it sort of left me with the sense that I needed to do something that was a bit more purpose driven in my next role. And the opportunity came up to come to SUSE as an open source business. I didn't really know what open source was, but I just had the sense that it was something different from normal corporate. The role here was running transformation. They had a new CEO, and so I took it, sort of very kind of left field from where my career had been, and that I just had this pull to something that was sort of more purpose centric. And so started out as the head of transformation, stepped into transformation and strategy, and ultimately got offered the chief people officer at a time when they needed a new chief people officer. So it's been a very tangential journey, but certainly my gut that open source was more purposeful turned out to be true.
And tell us a bit, like what is SUSE doing, and what are you doing as a chief people officer at
So
SUSE? How does it match with the transformation, and how can we imagine this?
SUSE gets me really excited because we are the world's largest independent open source business. We make Linux, but we manage many. We make Kubernetes management platforms, but we manage many. We make AI solutions, again, very interoperable, designed to use any LLM. And we make edge solutions designed to be interoperable with many others. So the premise under all of those things is giving customers choice, right? It's about saying, we know you have to do these things. We know edge is something that every single company out there that has a distributed workforce or base needs. We know that AI is going to be with us for as long as probably all of us that are working. And we know that many of our customers are battling with infrastructure management with Kubernetes and Linux. So let's just make all of those things easier without telling customers how they have to do it. So while we're technically an infrastructure management software business, we're really a business that gives customers choice. So that's what SUSE does. And as the chief people officer, my job is really trying to harness that sense of open source, and to help us lead, manage, facilitate our people in a way that is aligned to that ethos of open source.
And how would you describe that alignment? I think it's great to have that on the open source on the product side. Say why do you need alignment there with the people that work for the open source, and how does it?
Yeah. So, when I came to SUSE, and maybe anecdotally a story, when I came to SUSE, I remember chatting to one of our engineers who said to me, when I was 16, I was sitting in my bedroom writing code for open source communities. I was contributing to SUSE long before I was being paid by SUSE. And that's really stuck with me. And it's really true for many, many, many of our employees. They come here with this sense of wanting something different. And that's not to say the normal corporate world or proprietary software is wrong. It's just really recognizing that people who come to SUSE very often came here with that same sense that I had of wanting something that is a bit more purpose driven. And we have to really acknowledge that about them. And so when they come here, they have this expectation of greater transparency, greater influence over our outcome, greater influence over the work they are going to do. But our customers come at it from going, I just want an enterprise ready solution, and I want one that's going to give me trust and security at a price that's affordable, like I would with any other proprietary software. So it's trying to merge that sense of trust and security that our customers want with the flexibility and freedom that our employees expect, and putting those two things together.
And how do you mix it? I mean, did you see then a mix of these, let's say, customer side people with a mix of those people that develop the code, open source code, or is it one or the other? How do you balance that out?
Yeah. It's very much a mix, and I think one of the things I learned when I arrived here is that people think they're the difference in those customer-centric people versus the engineering people are far more different than they actually are. There's actually a lot more similarity in them. Once you sort of scratch under the surface, they may sound different, but they really are the same, in that they're trying to look to solve customer problems in a much more democratic way. In open source, there is a sense of democratizing opportunity. You can't democratize outcomes because everybody does different things with an opportunity, but you can democratize an outcome. And I think if you went into our sales force, if you went into our engineering organization, the consistent thread in them is that they believe that we should be able to help the customer in a way that serves the customer. And yes, we profit as a company, we're a corporate entity, but it is about that sense of like the customer first, without locking them in or forcing them to do things they don't want to do. And I would say that that's the common thread between our customer-facing roles and our engineering roles.
And has that always been the case, or was that the outcome of a larger transformation? We talked in the first call a bit about it. Can you give an example of one of the transformation items, or how you achieved that joint mindset?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing that we did, and it was certainly something that I've never seen done anywhere else, is we had to write our mission and our values. And we were doing it at a time when I would say the organization is still pretty polarized and siloed into kind of like engineering and sales and that kind of thing. And the way that we did it was we used the entire workforce. We started by bringing together 200 of our leaders in one place, and we, in a very open source way, got them to go through a series of exercises, and we've open sourced this, so I can share the link and you can see the detail in more detail there. But the reality is we took them through a 3-step process of solo ideation to write a mission and values. We then put them into groups where they really work through different words on like what really reflects SUSE, what really doesn't reflect SUSE. We got them to align. We did a number of team building exercises to really get them to align on what our real reason for existence is, and then got them to write mission statements. We then got them to go out into our organization and simulate those workshops across the globe. And again, we did that virtually with people who couldn't come together in person. So really what we ended up with was the entire organization participating in our values writing exercise and in our mission writing exercise. Got to 260 missions. we used a very data-driven and AI approach to then get all of those values and the missions down into essentially a list of 10 mission statements. The company voted, and that's our mission statement today. And we did a very similar thing with the values, and then we really used data to eke out which of all of the values and words that employees have contributed or team members have contributed were in fact our values. And today we landed on choice, innovation, trust, and community. And the thing that's interesting to me is how the process of writing our values has really created cohesion behind the values, but also evidence what they should be. You can't say that choice or trust or innovation is a value if you haven't demonstrated those things in the process of getting to them. So that was a big thing for us. But what it did was it created a situation where we had these events across the globe with cross-functional groups who didn't just write our values and our mission, but they got to know each other, and they got to understand that they were more similar than different. And so I think we believe that the exercise of writing the mission and the values was as important as the exercise of bringing these people together. But it means the companies coalesced around that mission and values. There's no debate about it. It's not a sticker on a wall.
Yeah, it's super interesting that you say, okay, we bring the people together to almost democratically, as I understand, develop the mission and the value. Whereas probably in some companies you would say, oh, that's a waste of time. We set it and everyone needs to follow. It's a completely different approach. But did I understand you right? You said also it was an AI enabled, the generation.
Yeah, so the values in particular, when you consider that we have 2,500 people and we had these 3 steps of first solo ideation with literally no drop-down boxes. We literally sent out this form where people could put any words down, and we asked them questions like, when you think of the word of Susan, what does it remind you of? Like very structured, data-driven approach, but very open-ended. And so because of the amount of data that we collected from that, and then we defined this card game which we played, which helped people to filter from the many to the few, and we captured all of that. There was just too much data to get a human to consume. So we did use AI to help us get from a lot of inputs to our final outcome.
That's the super use case for AI also. It's such an interesting company. No, thanks for sharing. And I mean, let's maybe zoom a bit back. You described how you brought all the people together. I remember when we spoke first, also you mentioned here and there, you're going to use consultants and contractors to support type of transformations. What type of parallels do you see when it comes to open source and open talent, where you can bring in people? Is that what parallels do you see?
Sure. So I think there's sort of 2 answers to that, and the one is about today. And if you think about the open source community today, the code that's being produced is being produced by people voluntarily across the globe who've earned their right to play through time and demonstration of their skills. And so there's a incredible sense of community and ecosystem there that I think people don't always understand. You even though you're getting paid not a penny to participate in the open source projects, you're having to earn your right to contribute, and it's a very structured process. So I think there's the sense of where I think the world is going today in open source already. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think that when we cast our minds forward, we are moving towards a world where, even though companies don't love the idea of contractors because we have the sense of it's complicated from a tax perspective and it's complicated from a loyalty perspective, the line of contractors stroke consultants, I think, is going to get more and more blurred. And I think companies are going to more and more look to freelance talent or community talent or open talent, because it'll be a case of getting somebody who's here to do a particular thing that they have a skill to do, a capacity to do. They're more oriented around execution and time, and I think that's going to grow. Like I think as a generation, as a group of people on Earth right now, we've never been more focused on well-being and balance and the space to kind of have time to do things other than work than this generation of people. And so I think the sense of actually I only want to work 10 months a year, or I want to do project work, or actually I want to work for 2 companies or 10 companies because I can learn more and do more interesting things, is we just see it coming across more and more from people out in the workforce. And it's not just the younger generations. We also see people coming out sort of the I would call the top end of their career and going, actually, I don't want to be full-time employed anymore. I want to do exciting projects that I'm really interested in. And in return, when an employer hires me, they're getting someone who's highly motivated, highly skilled, that I'm going to come in and do this piece of work, and then I'm going to go take 3 months off. So I think we're definitely seeing the shift to a workforce that is not 9 to 5 the way that it used to be, and is far more flexible and unstructured than it used to be. And I think that's a real win for the employee, but I also think it's a real win for the employer. I look at the people who come in and do that with us, and for us, it takes the shape of people who are on fixed term contracts, sometimes long term fixed term contracts, and sometimes a couple of days a week full time employment. And what I see is people who've I don't want to discredit the people who work 5 days a week, because we have amazing people in our org who work 5 days a week. But the people who do that very often have this stronger sense of why they are here when they're here, and a much more laser focus on that.
And I find that super interesting because 2 weeks ago I was at the freelance conference, Freelance Unlocked, that is specifically also looking at Germany. And in Germany, you have the focus where a lot of people would say, even especially looking into politics, they would say, look, freelancers are people that deliberately chose not to have a fixed and stable income. So it's a bit the work-labor mindset of the 1980s. Yeah. But as you describe it, I think there are a lot of advantages. Do you see more people that have a very niche specialist background and then come in on those very specific points to support? Or do you also going forward see a role for generalists? Because a question we often get asked, of course, in Expert Powerhouse, do companies at all still need generalist people, like a generalist consultant? Or is the world moving in terms of freelancers towards a highly specialized niche, let's say a samurai people that come in and help on a specific project to succeed?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question, and I find my answer on this pivoting quite a lot with AI. If I start with a generalist, I think every organization I speak to is lacking in execution skills. The world is moving so rapidly that the ability to execute is all of our weakness. Like, whether we like it or not, none of us is getting work done as quick as we want. And so the challenge of execution is very effectively solved by bringing in a generalist whose real competence is execution. So they may not know a lot about your business or about the subject matter area. They probably have a general broad view, but their real competence is the ability to hold you and your organization to account to execute. So I think that's the first point, is that I think we definitely still see the place of the generalist. And I think we're probably moving more in that direction. And I think where I oscillate on the deep expertise is that today we still have quite a high level of nervousness around AI. But I think as we become more confident about AI, and as we see AI's ability to answer deep on a topic, if I think about where agentic AI is going, we are going to have deep technical expertise on topics in bots. And so the thing I'm grappling with a little bit is, what is the timeline and what is the real impact on kind of deep specialization? My gut is, at least for the next 5 years, we probably still see specialists, kind of like you talk about the samurai. But I don't know after that, Christian. I think it's pretty unpredictable after that. My one exception, I would say, is when it comes to human skills. Like, I think whether we like it or not, people who have the ability to get more out of people are always going to be, I think, in demand. And so, I don't want to, in no way do I want to diminish the capability of someone who's maybe a very deep maths expert. But I think the speed with which we will get to a place where a strong, actuarial skill could be replaced by AI is going to happen quicker. Then we're going to get to a place where a really true executive coach would be replaced. those are examples I give you just because I'm like trying to evidence the difference in what I think will happen.
Yeah. So what I sense is basically you're saying also, I think companies should aim to be more people-centric, even more people-centric, because then you have like really people focusing on people and getting more out of people. And
Yeah.
at the same time, also, you've achieved that already with SUSE being a customer-centric organization by having that joint language of and vision where you want to go. What would you say in your experience? What is the number one thing that companies overlook when they want to become people-centric?
I don't know that it's overlook. I think we all see it, and I don't by no means do I think we've reached the
Underestimate.
end of our destination. But I think the hardest problem that we're all trying to solve is how do you find the balance between people centricity and performance? I think one of the things that you often see happen is companies rush down the route of people centric and they compromise performance culture in the process.
Mhm.
And I think that balance of we're going to deliver a high performing culture and we're going to be people centric is hard because often they are misinterpreted as opposite ends of the spectrum.
Mhm. And if you think about our audience, what advice would you give to leaders to navigate that balance?
Yeah.
It's a hard one. I see it myself, and it's been discussed a lot. But especially, I'd say even in Germany here, you had a lot of discussions around should we have a 4-day work week, whereas maybe someone in India would say all people should work at least 70 hours a week. Yeah, where do you basically and that working hours is not performance, of course. Also, that it's also clear. What advice would you give to leaders to navigate that
Yeah.
balance?
And the two things that we've prioritized here, and which I think are the things that are important. Number one is really transparent communication. And what I mean by that is sometimes you're going to have to say things that the employees are not going to like, and that's okay. Like, our big thing is once we've made a decision, once we're heading to making a decision, we communicate and we accept that our employees are not always going to love the things we say. We explain why we're doing what we're doing, particularly the things that are going to feel like they're out of line with our character. So we communicate transparently and clearly and accept that sometimes it's not going to be popular. And I think the other thing is really sort of leaning in on diversity, which means that like sometimes what is right for one person is not right for another, and trying to figure out how you can customize what you're doing in the context of diverse wishes, whether it's age, whatever it is, people are in different places in their lives, and what is going to get the best out of them to get them to perform is very different. And I think that's probably the glue on performance and people centricity.
How do you train your leaders for that? Because I feel like this is really like looking after each of the employees very specifically, looking what they need, how can they best perform. Maybe a lot of things are on their plate and a lot of uncertainty is there, and they have problems and things they need to be contained also here and there. How do you prepare your leaders for that?
Yeah, and again, we're only at the beginning of our journey. I think there's a lot more to do, but there's a few things. Number one, we don't only train our leaders. I'll give you an example. We've just recently done a set of training around how to have hard conversations, and we don't just train our leaders; we train our employees as well because we think the onus on is as much on our employee to drive performance as it is the leader. So we have it's different training, but they both get trained. Same with performance management. When we're doing training around performance management, we don't just train our leaders, we train our people because we think that there is a sweet spot where most employees and leaders are actually trying to get to the same place. And where they get stuck is they don't know how to have that conversation.
Right.
So all of our training at the moment is really around how to enable people to own their own success, to have those conversations, and that is by far the biggest component of it. The other thing that I think is super important is role modeling. We're particularly lucky because we have a leadership team who role model the transparency, who really try and live and breathe these conversations with their teams. And so that's a really big part of it, is that they hopefully see what it looks like from our CEO, from our exec team, from their leaders, and that makes it a lot easier. But we have, I think anybody who's sitting there thinking, well, I'm going to roll out a training and then it's going to be better, it just doesn't work that way.
And I mean, probably as a last angle to bring that in, if you bring freelancers into that equation, yeah, would you consider them at all different than employees? Would they need that training as well? How would you, lead them in a way? What we often see is, of course, the employees, leaders look after them. They try to make it a greater place. Once there is the contractor, it's just, he's there, we pay him, he needs to deliver. So it's a very different approach, I would say. How would you describe that? How would they best fit into that team?
So we really worked to make sure that our contractors have the same of everything as our employees do. That does get quite difficult when someone's only with you for a very short stint of time, like a couple of months or something. But our long-term contractors get all of the same access as a normal employee. I think it's probably if you're a contractor in our business that's not perfect yet. I think, a lot of places where you hire a contractor is somewhere far away from an existing team to solve an existing problem. And so I think we still have a lot more work to do. But we've started with things like they get the same system access, they get all of the same timelines and kind of like system processes like goal reviews. When we send out an email or do training around how to have a difficult conversation, that goes to everybody. It's not just our direct employees.
I find it very impressive. One last advice you would give to freelancers working with the teams they don't know yet?
Yeah. I think transparent and honest conversations, like being prepared to say that just because my life choice was that I'm a freelancer or a contractor, it doesn't mean I feel any less attached to this business. So I want you to know that I'm all in. Like, be prepared to have that conversation to say your interpretation of me as a freelancer may be that actually I'm just here for the paycheck, but I'm really not, and actually articulate why you're there, what you're hoping to achieve, and actually you'll find that your goals and aspirations are not dissimilar from anyone else. But I think really be prepared to have that conversation.
Lisa, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, thanks for joining the show today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Christian.